The village of Nibiringa was alive with the chatter of daily life. Children ran barefoot across the sun-baked earth, their laughter mingling with the low hum of women weaving mats in the shade. At the heart of the village stood the council square, where the elders often gathered under the ancient baobab tree. Their words were considered the guiding stars for the people, and the griot's stories bound the community together with lessons of morality and unity. Amani, the daughter of Elder Osei, was known for her beauty and quick mind. Her eyes, sharp and thoughtful, mirrored the strength of her spirit. The villagers admired her, speaking of her grace and intelligence with pride. Yet admiration was often accompanied by whispers of envy. "She is too perfect," some would say quietly. Others wondered if such perfection could stand untested by the trials of life. Amani carried her responsibilities with pride, yet a quiet weight rested on her shoulders. She yearned for freedom to choose her path, but understood the expectations placed upon her as the daughter of a revered elder. Her heart longed for Kofi, a farmer who had always dreamed of building a future with her. Kofi was a hard-working man with calloused hands and a determined spirit. He tilled his fields with dedication, envisioning a life where he could provide for Amani. He often visited Elder Osei, presenting gifts of yams and honey in hopes of gaining his favor. But the elder's gaze was always heavy, his unspoken words a reminder of Kofi's humble status. Kofi bore this silently, his love for Amani giving him strength to continue trying. Zuleika, Amani's cousin, was a picture of charm and wit. Yet behind her smiles was a simmering resentment. She had always lived in Amani's shadow, her achievements eclipsed by her cousin's reputation. "Amani is flawless," villagers would say, their words slicing at Zuleika's pride. She wished to step out of the shadow, to be seen for herself, not as second to anyone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elder Osei called a gathering. His voice was steady as he declared, "Amani shall be wed to Seifu, the trader from Tambira." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Amani felt her chest tighten. Seifu was wealthy, his name respected. But her heart rebelled against the decision. She stole a glance at Kofi, whose jaw clenched as he lowered his eyes. Tradition weighed heavily in the air, leaving no room for dissent. Amani remained silent, though her mind raced with questions. How could she choose duty over her heart? Was it selfish to want both love and respect for her family? Zuleika watched with sharp eyes, sensing an opportunity. Amani's heartbreak was palpable, and Zuleika saw how she could twist it to her advantage. In hushed tones, she comforted Amani, offering herself as a confidant. But her intentions were far from pure. Her whispers planted seeds of doubt and despair in Amani's mind, all while Zuleika plotted ways to turn the situation to her benefit. That night, the griots gathered the village around a fire. Their voices rose and fell like waves as they told an old tale. A tree without deep roots will always fall to the storm. The words lingered in the air, carried by the crackling flames. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, as if sensing that these words were not just a warning, but a glimpse of the trials to come. In the quiet of her room, Amani sat alone, grappling with her thoughts. Outside, the village settled into silence, but within her, a storm had begun to brew. Amani sat in the dim light of the forest hut, her hands trembling as guilt consumed her. Every sound outside, the rustling leaves, the distant call of an owl, felt like a voice condemning her. Her thoughts turned to the village, her father, and Kofi. What had she done? The lies and chaos weighed on her heart like a heavy stone. "This cannot continue," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I must return." The next morning, the village council gathered under the ancient baobab tree. Elders sat in a semicircle, their faces solemn, as villagers crowded around to hear the proceedings. The air was thick with tension, whispers of Amani's disappearance still fresh in everyone's minds. Suddenly, a hush fell over the crowd as Amani stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Gasps echoed through the square. "Amani," someone whispered. "She's alive." Elder Osie, her father, rose slowly, his face a mixture of shock and anger. "Amani," he said sternly, "where have you been?" Amani lowered her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "Father, I have come to confess," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I was not kidnapped. I hid myself, hoping it would force you to reconsider the marriage to Sefu." The crowd erupted in murmurs, and Elder Osei's brow furrowed in disbelief. "You deceived us all? Do you understand the shame you have brought upon this family?" Amani nodded, her tears flowing freely. "I was desperate. I feared a life without Kofi, but I also feared bringing dishonor to our family. My actions were selfish, and I accept whatever punishment you deem fit." The elders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Some villagers murmured words of sympathy, while others shook their heads in disapproval. From the crowd, Zuleika stepped forward, her voice sharp and filled with indignation. "How convenient for you to confess now, Amani," she said, her words cutting through the silence. "Do you not see the chaos you have caused? The elders' trust, the village's peace? You destroyed it all with your selfishness." A few villagers nodded in agreement, their anger shifting toward Amani. Zuleika continued, her tone growing more venomous. "And what of Kofi? He was accused because of you. You may act noble now, but your actions speak louder than your tears." The murmurs grew louder, and Amani's shoulders sagged under the weight of the accusations. Zuleika turned to the elders, her voice steady but laced with false humility. "Elders, it pains me to see my own cousin bring such shame upon our family." Before anyone could respond, the elder griot rose from his seat, his staff tapping the ground with authority. The crowd fell silent. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying the wisdom of generations. "Truth is a seed, and when it is buried, it will find a way to sprout." The griot's piercing eyes settled on Zuleika. "I have heard the whispers in the wind, and I have seen the footprints in the sand. Zuleika, is it not true that you were the one who helped Amani hide?" Zuleika froze, her composure faltering. I only wanted to help her," she stammered. The griot raised his hand for silence. "You bribed a villager to keep her hidden, did you not? And while the village worried and searched, you spread rumors to incriminate Kofi." Gasps rippled through the crowd as the griot continued, his voice unwavering. "Deceit has a way of revealing itself, no matter how deeply it is buried." Zuleika fell to her knees, her tears flowing as the weight of her lies crushed her. "Yes, it is true," she sobbed. "I was jealous of Amani. She has always been admired, always seen as perfect. I thought if I could turn her misfortune into my opportunity, I would finally be noticed." Elder Osie's face darkened, his disappointment palpable. "Zuleika, you betrayed not only Amani, but the trust of this entire village. Zuleika looked up, her voice breaking. I am sorry. I let my envy consume me. Please, give me a chance to make amends. The elders conferred quietly before Elder Ose spoke again. Redemption does not come through words alone. You will serve this village and rebuild the trust you have broken. Zuleika nodded, her head bowed in shame. I will do whatever it takes. With Zuleika's confession, the attention turned to Kofi, who stood silently at the edge of the gathering. The elders called him forward, their voices softer now. Kofi, Elder Ose said, it seems you were wrongfully accused. We owe you an apology. Kofi's jaw tightened, his eyes filled with hurt. I sought only to protect Imani, he said, his voice low. But it seems my love was not enough for her to trust me. Imani stepped toward him, her hands clasped. Kofi, I was afraid that if I involved you, it would only bring you harm. I see now that I was wrong. Please, forgive me. Kofi looked at her for a long moment before turning away. Forgiveness is not so easily earned, he said, walking into the crowd. The villagers watched in silence as the griot stepped forward once more, his voice rising above the tension. This tale will be told for generations, he declared. Let it serve as a reminder that deception, no matter how well intended, will never bring peace. Trust, like the roots of a tree, must run deep for the community to stand strong. The villagers dispersed, their hearts heavy but their minds filled with lessons. Imani stood beneath the baobab, her tears falling into the earth as the sun dipped below the horizon. The council square was alive with anticipation as the villagers gathered beneath the sprawling branches of the ancient baobab tree. Elders, adorned in traditional robes, sat in a semicircle at the base of the tree, their expressions stern but expectant. The air was thick with tension, yet it was the soft melody of the griot's song that stilled the crowd. Their voices rose and fell in unison, weaving a story of lessons past, setting a solemn tone for what was to come. Imani stepped forward, her heart pounding as she faced the crowd. Her gaze swept over the familiar faces, some filled with curiosity, others with disappointment. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself and spoke, her voice clear yet tinged with regret. Elders, my father, my people, she began. I have come to admit my wrongs. What I did was born from fear and desperation. I sought to escape a fate I did not choose, but in doing so, I brought pain to all of you. The villagers murmured, their voices like a low tide, as Elder Ose's piercing gaze remained fixed on his daughter. He was silent, his lips pressed tightly together. Imani continued, tears glistening in her eyes. I thought only of myself, not of the burden I placed on this village, on Kofi, or on my family. For this, I am deeply sorry. Elder Ose's expression softened as he listened. He rose, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his own realization. Amani, you acted out of fear, but I too bear some responsibility. I pushed you toward a path that did not consider your heart. Perhaps I forgot that duty without love is an empty vessel. The crowd fell silent, absorbing his words. Imani lowered her head, grateful for her father's acknowledgement, but her heart remained heavy with shame. She turned her attention back to her mother. From the crowd, Zuleika stepped forward hesitantly. Her once proud posture was now humble, her face marked with the regret she could no longer hide. Elder Ose turned to her, his voice firm but not unkind. Zuleika, your actions worsened what was already a wound to this village. What do you have to say for yourself? Zuleika's voice quavered as she replied, I allowed my envy to blind me. I thought that if I could outshine Amani, I would find peace. But I see now that I was wrong. I hurt the village, my family, and myself. The elders conferred quietly before Elder Osei spoke again. Zuleika, redemption comes not from words, but from actions. You will work for the betterment of this village. Through service you will rebuild what you have broken. I accept this, Zuleika said, bowing her head. I will make amends. Kofi, standing at the edge of the gathering, caught Amani's gaze. She stepped toward him, her voice soft. Kofi, I failed you. I did not trust you enough to share my burdens. I cannot undo what I have done, but I ask for your forgiveness. Kofi's eyes, though filled with hurt, softened as he replied, Forgiveness is not given lightly, Amani, but I am willing to try. Let us rebuild together, one step at a time. The elders nodded approvingly, and the villagers murmured words of encouragement. The griots stepped forward, their voices rising once more to craft a lesson from the day's events. Deception may build a house, they sang, but only truth will make it a home. Their words echoed through the square, a reminder of the strength in honesty and unity. Amani, moved by the moment, knelt at the base of the baobab tree and placed a young sapling into the earth. With her hands, she covered its roots, each movement deliberate and symbolic. This tree, she said, her voice steady, will stand as a reminder of growth, resilience, and the lessons we have learned. The elders blessed the tree, their hands raised in unison as the villagers watched. The sapling stood small but firm, a promise of strength to come. As the sun began to set, its golden light bathed the square, and the village, though scarred by the events, felt the first stirrings of healing. The village elders sat under the great baobab tree, their faces lined with wisdom and their eyes reflecting years of experience. Around them, the villagers gathered in a circle, their expressions a mix of curiosity and reflection, as they listened to the griot recount the lessons learned from recent events. Amani's story, began the griot, his voice strong yet melodic, is one of many hearts pulled in two directions. Her struggle between duty and desire reminds us of the delicate balance between tradition and the longing for self-determination. Elder Osei nodded slowly, his voice carrying the weight of his years. We cannot deny that tradition anchors us, like the roots of the baobab. But even the strongest roots must allow the branches to grow freely toward the sky. Amani's choice was born of fear, yes, but it also shows the yearning of a heart seeking its own path. The crowd murmured in agreement, the words resonating deeply. A young woman near the back whispered to her companion, Perhaps tradition and the heart can walk together, not apart. The griot continued, shifting his gaze to Zuleika, who sat quietly, her head bowed. There is another lesson here, one of envy, which grows like a weed, choking all it touches. Zuleika raised her head slightly, her eyes filled with regret. The griot's words softened, yet their meaning cut deep. Zuleika, your jealousy led you to act against not only Amani, but the harmony of this village. Let us remember that comparing oneself to others is a dangerous path, for it blinds us to the gifts we already hold. bear a Wa leader's presence wherever you go, Zuleika. Zuleika took a deep breath and spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I see it now. My envy has brought nothing but pain, not only to others but to myself. I will work to make amends, and I will learn to value what I have instead of what I lack. The villagers murmured among themselves, and one elder leaned forward, addressing Zuleika. Your journey begins now. Redemption is not given, it is earned through action, through humility, and through service. The griot gestured toward Amani, who stood beside her father. And Amani, too, has faced the weight of her choices. Her public confession reminds us that forgiveness begins with accountability. It is not enough to feel regret. One must have the courage to speak it aloud. Amani nodded, her voice firm yet humble. I have learned that my actions, no matter the intention, have consequences. I will spend my days rebuilding trust, not through words, but through deeds. Elder Osai spoke again, his tone steady but filled with compassion. This is the way of our people. We do not punish to destroy, we guide to heal. Justice must walk hand in hand with mercy, or it is no justice at all. The crowd fell silent, absorbing the weight of his words. Slowly, the tension in the air began to ease, replaced by a sense of understanding. The griot's voice rose again, weaving the lessons into a final proclamation. Let this tale be told for generations. Let it remind us of the power of truth, the poison of envy, and the strength found in forgiveness. For while deception may build a house, only truth can make it a home. The villagers nodded in unison, the lesson clear, and as the griot's voice faded into the evening air, the village seemed lighter, as if the weight of the past days had finally begun to lift.